Welcome to Discovering with Dr. Deb. Our last season, we were discovering the Enneagram with Dr. Deb, and it was packed with a lot of information while also being a lot of fun to talk about and explore the Enneagram and why we do what we do. So go back and check out those episodes if you haven't seen them already. Here we are in season 2, and I'm going to be focusing on trauma and using EMDR therapy as a tool to help process trauma. My co-host for this season is psychologist Dr. Christie Sprowls from Austin, Texas. She has traveled all over the world to provide EMDR in humanitarian efforts, and she has also trained clinicians and providers in EMDR therapy. So get ready, let's dive right in and talk about trauma. Hi, and we're here for another episode of Discovering with Dr. Deb. I'm here with Dr. Christie Sprowls. She's my co-host. Hi. Today we're going to talk about how does trauma affect the body and the ways in which trauma affects the body. And I think so often, like sometimes I have a little pain in my back, and so there's a physical response, there's physiological response, there's all kind of ways that we internalize trauma. And so talk to us a little about how it affects the body when we have something that's traumatic, whether it's big T, little t, neglect, like some of the other things we've talked about before. But what does it do to us?
So it's really interesting because it impacts like over 50 possible diseases.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And so the research is coming out that I just thought was fantastic. There's something called the ACEs study, which shows that with adverse childhood experiences, we can manifest at some point in our life up to 50 diseases like lupus, heart disease, being overweight, being, all these different types of things that can affect your health. It's going to affect that in your body.
Wow.
Just like when we have a trauma and it stores in the brain.
Yeah.
So does trauma store in different parts of
the
your
body. Oh my goodness.
And I'll talk about a case here shortly about a woman who had neck pain for 10 years.
Okay.
The other thing that it affects is the brain and our stress response and how we respond forever, unless we work on that, during two stressors in the environment. So the stress response goes up, your cortisol areas and norepinephrine responses go up, right? We don't want high cholesterol. We don't want all the things that can come along with that. It also tells the amygdala, it says, yikes, somebody better do something about this. And then it goes down to the adrenals, and all of a sudden because you got to get ready to run because the amygdala is telling you something's going on.
Okay, so that's that flight response.
That's right.
Okay, yeah.
And then it takes some time for the body to reach the frontal lobes.
Okay.
And say, all is well. It's
right.
Okay. You don't have to be in this response. Right?
Okay.
Your body can start calming down. So as you can see, it can create disease. It can be lodged in a particular part of your body. People generally, interestingly enough, regardless of the trauma that they've experienced, they may always have issues with their gut, right? Or their stomach, they feel it there. Or they have a ball in their throat that they just can't quite seem to get out of there. And it's this little ball of emotion.
Yeah.
And I'll say this and then jump in at any time.
Okay.
But there was a woman who came to me because she had lost her mama, and she was taking care of her mother, and her mother got very angry at her and told her to go away. Okay. And she left the house, and she could never go back to be with her mother and to take care of her, and also when she died, right? She didn't get to see or be with her mom. And she came in to work on that. We worked on that. We were getting very successful. We actually got to the end of the disturbance for her about that incident and all that it entailed. And one of the things that we do in EMDR is we ask then for people to scan their body.
Right.
To look for what? Hidden stuff, right?
Right.
So she says, I have this pain here in my neck.
Okay.
And, but I've had it for 10 years. 10 years. Oh, okay. Well, do you mind if we just see what happens if we focus on that? Yes, it's okay, but yeah, okay, right. If you want to, let's do that.
So she humored you.
Yes, she humored me. I always ask.
Because it's like, oh,
Yeah.
it's fine, but okay, fine if
Yeah.
you really insist.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
okay,
So I
uh-huh.
did. We focused
Right.
on that. Right?
Sure.
And lo and behold, it went away. Okay. And so at the end of the session, she says, yeah, that's great. And, but probably when I get home, it's going to come back. And so I said, well, let's remain curious. Let's see.
Right.
I don't know. I can't promise you it's going to be gone forever.
Right.
I just thought, well, maybe we could get you some relief. So this is fantastic. And she goes, yeah. I'll let you know what happens. Well,
She didn't think it was going to last.
no, she didn't. She was going to go home and, to come
Yeah.
back. So anyway, lo and behold, it never came back.
Wow.
Okay, never came back.
Yeah.
And it was attached to the grief of her mom.
Of her mama. Wow.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So-
So just
Isn't that
curious.
crazy?
So the body scan is, so we'll talk more in another segment about EMDR, the
Yeah.
8 phases of EMDR and what they entail. And so we have phase 4, which is doing the bilateral stimulation. 5, we're like instating the positive cognition.
That's right.
This is 6.
Yes.
Phase 6. So
That's
we do
right.
this body scan, and like what are you feeling in your body? What are you noticing?
Mm-hmm.
So she notices this pain in her neck.
Yes.
And then you do what then to help
Okay.
alleviate that?
Okay, so I'll say, notice that pain in your neck.
Oh, okay.
And focus your attention there.
Okay.
And then I do bilateral stimulation.
Right.
So whatever they've chosen.
Okay.
Right? And they do bilateral stimulation on that, and they'll
Uh-huh.
kind of go, oh, crack. They'll feel their little cracking necks or
Uh-huh.
whatever, and kind of go, oh, well, yeah, it's still there. Okay,
Uh-huh.
notice that. And
So you're not connecting it necessarily with the grief.
no, I don't do anything.
Okay.
I've already asked them actually to hold the memory in mind along with that positive,
Gotcha.
and see if there's anything left in their body.
Okay.
And
okay.
if they're, it can be, again, a crick in my neck, it can be, or my shoulder, it can be, anything.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
And I think for me, most often it's like you said, the gut.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
My heart, my gut,
Right. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
whole part of my body.
Yeah. And it never came back for that lady.
No, it never came back.
Wow. Right.
I have another really good story too.
We'll share it.
Okay, well, this is a body story, and this is a story about my late business partner.
Okay.
But she and I actually did one of the very first conferences for EMDR.
Okay.
Just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of crazy, but anyway, she had a slipped disc. Okay, so she was in extreme pain. And there happened to be a guy there. I'll give a shout out for Mark Grant. He is from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mark does pain relief with EMDR. So she had this horrific pain.
Yeah.
And he said, come on up here and I'll see what I can do for you.
Okay.
Okay, so they in front of all the people at the conference, right? It was like a big meeting. Anyway, they did pain protocol on her for EMDR. And as a result, everybody kept asking her what her pain level was. So she put a bit on this big thing at the front where they could check her pain every day. Well, he got it down to a level 0 of pain.
Wow.
And she would tell that story, give me a little goosebumps. She would tell that story during our trainings.
Mm-hmm.
And about 20 years in, or maybe 30 years in, I finally looked at her and I said, well, Carol, what happened to the pain after that? Okay, this is real pain. It's a slipped disc.
Yeah. She's hurting.
Right?
Right.
She said, and I know that makes me sound like a little bit of a something enthusiast or something, but, well, it makes me excited.
Yeah.
She never had the pain again. I never asked her that question.
Yeah.
Is that interesting?
Yeah.
And then when she did, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Because a slipped disc.
Yeah.
So even though we may have psychosomatic pain, I'm not saying that means it's not real.
Right.
Sometimes I've had somebody get mad at me about that, and I'm like, oh no, it's every bit as real. It's just like phantom limb pain, right? Mm-hmm. That's another body trauma, and the brain goes, hey, I'm still itchy down here, and there's no leg.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, those are my two little top of mind stories to tell you about the EMDR and the body,
Right.
And how it gets stored there.
Right.
So it's brain and body, full
Right.
body.
And so you said when we first started today about 50 different diseases. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
When I heard that, I really was kind of mind-blowing.
Right.
Because then again, if you look at this and you think about, okay, that's, that's just how I grew up. Because like, really, how do we know any different? If we've grown up in an environment, we just think everybody's house is like this.
Right.
Right? We don't. I mean, you're a kid.
Well, we hear people say, stress induced. We even
Yes.
have that term, stress induced. And I mean, trauma is stressful.
Yes.
I mean, so there's really a connection there.
Yes, absolutely.
To it. Ulcers.
Yes.
Any of the IBS.
Yes.
Those kinds of things.
Yes.
I mean, that's
All of that.
all of that. Right.
Isn't it amazing?
It's amazing.
And
yeah.
and counting. But it makes sense, right? If you're having high cortisol and you are, all of this stuff is going on, an alert, sort of hypervigilant, you're really assaulting the body constantly.
Yeah, and I don't think we draw that connection, like PTSD, how it affects the body. Like it keeps you in this constant state, like you just said, hypervigilance.
Yes.
I mean, if you're always on guard, and a lot of professions they are. I mean, I work with a lot of people that are medical professionals, and they're ER docs or they're surgeons, anesthesiologists, law enforcement people. Like their job is hypervigilance. So a lot of times, even when they leave and go home, they really have to have some time to come back down.
Yes.
But I mean, if you have PTSD or some of these other things too, that just naturally you're just there. A lot of times they don't come down from it,
Exactly.
But I think too, even saying that, the people that I listed, those professions, sometimes I think they stay there so long that it's hard for them to come back down from it.
I agree.
And the nature of those jobs, there's a lot of trauma.
Yes.
A lot of trauma. I'm working with somebody right now who's in law enforcement, has investigated, violent crimes and crimes against children and things like that. And so it's like, oh my gosh. And I say, how do you process that? How do you, and they don't.
They don't.
There's not any.
Put a lid on it.
Put a lid on it. So it's kind of like we talked about, it kind of gets stuck and hidden and locked in.
Yeah.
And locked into the body.
Yes. And I found in working with like police officers and things, and this is something that we help them with, is their traumatic response. So their own traumas, right? But they kind of wear them as a badge.
They do. They
Okay.
do. Yes.
That happened to you? Oh,
Yeah.
let me tell you what happened to me.
Right,
They
right,
start
right.
kind of
Right.
playing with the horrific things that can happen. And, they tend to, and like EMTs, and they tend to laugh at these horrors that they see, right? They start kind of laughing at it in a way to keep a lid on. And Uvalde, keeping, so the idea is to allow any of that. I mean, it's amazing what they can do, and I actually love working with them because I don't worry about them. I mean, I love working with them, period. But man, oh man, they know how to close
They
something
can
down.
close it back up.
That's
right.
But they love it so much. They go, "You are such a special therapist. Can I give you a hug?"
I get that too.
And I'm like,
Yes.
"No, it isn't me.
Yes.
It isn't."
And another thing I found too, and this kind of talks about the body, but also a lot of people that are in those professions, they were primed for those professions because of their childhood and their experiences. And so they've learned to deal with those stressors and those triggers and those unpleasant and negative experiences. And they've coped. And so it sets them up for life in the military or life in law enforcement or traumatic, professions. And so it's kind of, and then they really will discount, like, oh, that wasn't that bad, and so sometimes it's like, gosh, really, it was though. Like, would you want your child to go through that? Like, no. Well, why not? Because it wasn't even really good for you to go through.
That's right.
And then, I don't worry about them as much either when I'm doing EMDR because, sometimes they're a little apprehensive, like, oh, we're going to let the cat out of the bag and the bag's wide open. No, you guys are so good at just closing it back up. I don't worry about that. So that is kind of nice. And I think we're getting some more I don't know, validation in those fields, you know, to kind of look at that in some areas. I know
Yes.
we're going to have one episode with somebody who's emergency medicine physician, just talking about they don't value that as much, and that
Yes.
those experiences are traumatic and need to be processed.
Yes.
And
Because
yeah,
I'm going to step out on a limb here.
okay.
But what happens is, in what we've discovered, and part of the reason why we did a research study with Vanderbilt and University of Texas School of Public Policy, was to see if we could give them EMDR to take that stress off of them, so that they don't rebound with it by using excessive use of force.
Oh, right.
Right?
Right.
And so, I mean, wouldn't that be a happy world?
Wouldn't that be a happy world? That would be, yeah.
And we proved that it did. Okay, so it does help. EMDR does help in that situation. And it's, why would we okay, like I said, I'm stepping out on a limb, but we've got to treat what's happening.
Yeah.
And there was a story, and I'm going to tell it.
Okay.
If this is okay, and this is all about the body too. But so one police officer stopped somebody who did this crazy thing in their vehicle and almost created loss of life. And what had happened the week before for this officer was he had seen the same exact accident, but where they had lost lives. And so he went up to this person in the car and grabbed him and said, "Don't you know what you just almost did?" Because of the trauma.
Right, it's a trauma response.
Yeah, it's a trauma
Absolutely.
response.
Absolutely.
So it's win-win.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's something that we really need to, as a profession, really try to reach out more and work with. And you know, I'm not rural Arkansas, but I'm in Arkansas, so I think that just explains it. I mean, I'm not putting it down or anything, but
I love it.
I think, you know, I've worked with the U.S. Marshal's Office, and we've had talks about these kinds of things, but even just smaller municipalities and things like that, and making that information, that knowledge, the research, the studies, and EMDR available to them. Because like I said, they've been primed for it because of earlier experiences. And so if we can help educate that, like, it's locked into their body.
That's right.
Like, let's free this from your body so that it's not a trauma response, and you deal with each situation then as it comes.
That's right. You're not bringing your whole history to bear on this one person.
Because you can't not do that.
Yeah. No. Well, remember, hidden, triggered,
absolutely,
action.
Right.
And you don't even have time. This is what I sort of talk about. You don't really even have time to worry about it, because it happens that fast. You don't even know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway. So
well, thanks for this chat. It's been helpful. I always learn
Welcome.
something when we talk.
Oh, how wonderful. As well with you. That's
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this episode, and we'll see you next time. If this content has been helpful to you, I'd appreciate it if you would please rate the podcast, post it, and share it on social media. And also post a review. If you'd like to get in contact with me, my phone is 479-561-7600, or email Dr. Deborah at anchoredhopecounseling.net or Dr. Deborah at drdebfordoctors.com. Our website at www.anchoredhopecounseling.net has some useful information, and you can also reach out to me through the website. Remember, you are enough just the way you are, and you are loved.